The Wisp, Chapter 14, The Diary. I waited for Guinevere to come to town. She didn't. I had to go to her. Fortunately, the forest surrounding Windfall was a place I knew well. Unfortunately, I entered it to find everything had changed. Clearings had disappeared and new ones formed. A lake had sprung up overnight. Worst of all, I found myself in a fight for my life with a wolf too large to be of our world, its teeth and claws like blades. Armed only with a penknife, I fended it off, but it was a battle I was likely to lose. My throat was all but in the creature's jaws when a glowing sight appeared. It challenged the wolf and led it on a chase. Seeing my chance, I ran for my life. I would eventually find what I sought, the maze. But what a sight I was! Bloodied and battered, I now wore rags. My clothing was in such a state I was almost tempted to go back. But then the day's heat was slipping away and the night's cold rolling in. The desire for warmth overcame my vanity. Comforting myself with the thought of taking shelter with Guinevere, I entered the maze. I didn't dally. A wolf howl urged me on. The maze wasn't more than 30 yards deep. Its twists and turns should have been few. Yet night fell and still I didn't find its center. The cross and its steeple remained in sight but gave no clue of what direction I should go. I was lost, hopelessly so. The hours passed, the air became colder, the wind sharper, and I eventually gave up. My real defeat came when I realized I couldn't find my way out either. I was trapped and in all likelihood about to freeze to death. Finding a sheltered corner to settle in, I pulled my wolf-tattered cloak around my legs. The cacophony of my chattering teeth broke the silence of the night. I wanted now only to wait out the hours before dawn. Deep down inside, I knew I had little hope of doing so. Black and enormous, I felt its shadow first. The wolf had returned. I heard it snarl, and in my mind's eye remembered its teeth before I saw the pearly glint in the scant light. I was exhausted, hungry, and very cold. I knew there'd be no way to fight it off. Still, I raised my little blade. It had once seemed so dangerous, but now I knew I should have brought a pistol. I readied myself for the coming of canines and claws. I waited. Nothing. The wolf did not attack. As though struck by a daze, it was stopped. Its paw hung suspended. I turned to what had its eye. She held her lantern. In the glow, her hair flowed like liquid gold. Rays of light shone through the pale pink of her billowing skirt, outlining her slender, long legs. Her face was a pearl under moonlit water. It was Guinevere. I yelled out a warning. For certain the wolf wouldn't hesitate to kill us both. But Guinevere came ever closer, not stopping until she was at my side. The wolf snarled again. She wasn't frightened. "This man is not for you, Brindolin," her musical voice sounded in the savage night. "You belong to me. I will not let you have him." It seemed the wolf was her pet, but a disobedient one at that. It snarled yet again. Guinevere brought from beneath her cloak a metal locket. It opened to reveal a large piece of amber. As the amber swayed, the wolf stopped its snarls and began to whimper. The clouds were cut in two and the moon shone down. The amber caught the moonlight, magnifying it. Bright yellow and orange flashed and reflected onto the silver of the wolf. The light spread, gaining heat and intensity. The wolf backed away to avoid the glare. "Be gone this night," Guinevere said. "Do not come again, none until I call you." The wolf snarled one last empty snarl and then turned on its heels. It disappeared into the shadows of the hedges. I rejoiced. I was saved. Or so I thought. Guinevere looked at me. Anger flashed behind her blue eyes. "Come," she ordered. I followed, though what else could I do? The wolf, no doubt, still lurked within the maze, the most savage of watchdogs. A small white cottage with red trim soon came into view. A fairy-tale cottage. Most peculiar, a tall steeple and cross grew from its squatness. There was a light in the window, the glow of the fireplace. My heart lifted. At least I'd soon be warm. The door opened. Martha, Guinevere's lady's maid, stood in the frame, candle in hand. She couldn't have been much older than Guinevere, maybe even younger, but she spoke like an old woman. "And where did you find him?" Her accent was hard to place. It definitely wasn't local, some odd combination of English, Irish, and something more familiar, but I wasn't able to place it. She moved her small frame aside to allow us entry. "He somehow found his way into Brindolin's grasp," Guinevere told her. Martha snorted and motioned to a hard stool where I was meant to sit. I settled. I'd have preferred one of the wing chairs that sat on either side of the fire, but after hours in the cold I was very pleased to warm myself. I think he was pursuing me. Guinevere looked at me like one surveying an ant that has found its way into one's lunch. I was filled with a heat that had nothing to do with the fire. She definitely did not return my tender feelings. On the contrary, she seemed to find me an annoyance. She crossed to one of the wing chairs and sat down wearily. The question is what to do with him now. She turned to me. Did you tell anyone you were coming here? I tried to answer, but found my tongue lay paralyzed on a sticky palate, and there was an odd lump in my throat that I hadn't felt since I was a lad in short pants. Indeed, sitting next to Guinevere on her comfortable chair, with Martha looming above, I felt a child on my low stool. It was all I could do to shake my head like some sort of mute imbecile. Well, that's something. Guinevere poured tea from a pot that sat on the table next to the chair and took a sip. I was reminded of my own dry throat. I may have licked my lips. We can't let him go, Martha said. Not after what he's seen. Guinevere let out a heavy sigh. No, we can't. A strange look came over Martha's face. Her grey eyes glinted with an odd light. My embarrassment was soon replaced by fear. It was becoming clear Guinevere had saved me from the wolf only to make me her victim. Escape? I lifted myself from the stool and made for the door. It wasn't locked, and it opened with ease. I had one foot outside when an unknown force pushed me back into the room. I took flight and would have crashed to the ground had not the stool, which I'd knocked over, righted itself and slid across the floor. My bottom landed squarely on the seat as the floor slammed shut and bolted itself. Still not quite understanding the power of the women, I tried again to come to standing. I tried with all my might, but I'd somehow lost the ability to perform such an everyday task. I was secured to the stool and it to the floor. Floor, stool, man, all one. I looked to Guinevere. Her hand glowed with its own light. She'd prevented my escape without even leaving her chair. Martha gave out a low, mocking chuckle. The last thing we need is you telling anyone who'll listen what you've seen and heard. I, for one, do not plan on being burned at the stake. The glow in Guinevere's hand dimmed. They don't burn witches any more, she reassured. No one believes these days. This isn't the 1600s. Windfall has changed. Besides, I kept you safe then. I will do so now. Witches. The word rung in my head. What else could explain these events but witchcraft? It wasn't true that no one believed in witches anymore. I definitely did. But witches were old and ugly. I looked at my captors. Their smooth faces. Not even a wrinkle. They had the skin of infants. Yet to me they seemed as old as crones. Still, what had Guinevere said? This was not the 1600s. She'd kept Martha safe then. Oh, of course. They'd lived these some 300 years, maybe more. After all I'd seen, immortality seemed but a small thing. Do you think we should take the chance to mend it, Martha? Really, you could easily defend yourself. All the same, you'll need to be dealt with. Permanently. Martha's hand glowed with power. The Wisp is published on Amazon.com. Also available on Amazon is Monsters, Real and Imagined, Tragic, Frightening, and Funny, All Too Brief, a collection of short stories and poetry. Strays, a collection of short stories and philosophical love poems, and Tattoo, Calling All Soldiers Home, a collection of poems in brevity.